One of the hallmarks of fascism, at least according to Mussolini, has been the merger of corporations and the state. Now, traditionally, capitalism has always had the government as a representative of its interests as opposed to being fully merged. But we're seeing this kind of merger right now with Amazon and the US government. According to an investigation by Politico, Amazon's massive cloud computing unit is aggressively recruiting U.S. government officials as it pushes to make itself essential to branches such as the U.S. military and the intelligence community. Now, Jeff Bezos has been on a tremendous crusade to strengthen his ties to the United States government. Nearly unlimited amounts of money have been spent on getting contracts for the U.S. government. Like I said, Pentagon, White House, Department of Justice, intelligence agencies, military, etc. And one of the ways that he's been doing this is by giving jobs to former government officials. Once they leave whatever position it is they have in the government, they immediately go into the private sector to look for work. And the place that hires these former officials, because they can be used to get contracts, is Amazon, particularly the cloud computing service. Since 2018, Amazon Web Services hired at least 66 former government officials with acquisitions, procurement, or technology adoption experience. Most hired directly away from government posts, and more than half of them from the Defense Department. That's a small portion of AWS's tens of thousands of employees, but a particularly key group to its federal businesses. Other AWS hires have come from departments including Homeland Security, Justice, the Treasury, and Veterans Affairs. This represents a very serious threat to U.S. democracy, or at least the separation of corporations and the state. As it is right now, there have been recently 600 acquisitions of former government officials who now work for Amazon, and they've had a tremendously expanding influence in the DC area. One of what's really astounding about this is that this has been a recent massive change. As it is, 500,000 new jobs were just created in that area this year alone, which brings it to about 1 million in total. All of this right near the very heart of the US government. This has been a strategy by Amazon in order to get business. They've almost completely dominated the federal contracts landscape to the point where Microsoft and Oracle essentially can't even compete with them anymore. And once in a while they can win a contract away, particularly one with regards to the Trump administration, where Trump was so angry with Jeff Bezos and Jeff Bezos' portrayal of him in the Washington Post that he went with somebody else, which is now being challenged in court. But this is giving them a severe monopoly power and a very strong power with regards to cloud computing and online storage. Hazem Al-Awlaki is a prime example. He joined AWS in December 2019 as a senior technical programmer for security assurances, working on large cloud projects straight off nearly 4 years at the Justice Department, the last year of which he spent as the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs. And this is essentially how Amazon gets these contracts for something that is essentially corruption. It's not the legal definition of corruption, but let's face it, this really is. And it's very important to Amazon because their Amazon Web Service, their cloud computing and storage, etc., accounts for half of all the profits that the company actually brings in. So now you understand why it's so important to get these contracts and to do it any way they can. Former government acquisitions officers help Amazon win contracts because of their intimate familiarity with the bureaucracy associated with the request for proposal process, Lodonsky said in an interview. Somebody who's been on the other side knows exactly how RFP proposals are competitively considered and analyzed. Now, while Lodonsky spends at least 1% of his time on government projects in his Amazon job, he said AWS colleagues sometimes seek him out for advice when they're trying to get DOJ contracts. It's not all been a bed of roses thus far, and in fact, just recently, within the last year or so, there was a great push for Amazon to distance itself from the U.S. government, particularly with regards to Trump's hostile immigration policy. So a lot of it was trying to make it look like they weren't helping the U.S. government do these things when they very much well are, and have continued to do so under the Biden administration. Because, they don't like bad press. One of the threats here is that as Amazon continues to dominate more and more contracts within the U.S. government, the harder it becomes for the U.S. government to regulate Amazon, and that is what the government is supposed to do. It's supposed to mitigate the disagreements and the contradictions between the various capitals in society. Well, it becomes very hard to do that if most of your cloud computing infrastructure comes from a private company like Amazon. Well, how do you punish that company? Suddenly move all of your technology off of their services onto another, on what essentially would be almost doing it on a whim? That's a massive undertaking, something that's not easily done. And it's very difficult to punish someone who holds that much of your information. And it's frightening to think that a private company controls, owns, and come on, let's be honest, has access to all that kind of confidential and top secret information. I don't believe for a second that Jeff Bezos doesn't have some kind of a back door into all this information that allows him to be able to view it at any time that he wants. Any other capitalist would look at him like he was a fool if he didn't build that kind of ability to be able to look at it. There's no evidence of this existing. But let's face it, it seems fairly obvious that given the way that the system works, that is something that he would do, because it's tremendously in his interest to have access to such sensitive information. Now, this goes into building a monopoly. Obviously, the more of the market you dominate, the more of an ability you have to dominate the market. As you know, capitalism tends towards monopoly, which is why there's a huge concentration of capital in as few hands as possible, as we have seen today, because they can outcompete their competitors because of the size of their organizations. And this is true of cloud computing as well. Amazon is trying to dominate the entire market and to be able to control it. And so that even if the time were to come that the US government wanted to leave Amazon, where would it go? Nobody else would have a large enough infrastructure in order to be able to support them. They would have to go with Amazon, and that would make regulating Amazon even more difficult. So you can see how this all builds up, and how it's a very real danger that the capitalist class gets too close to the government. And that is something that liberals have acknowledged for some time, and libertarians lament as not being real capitalism when it's the inevitable result of capitalism itself. So, aside from Amazon just being generally really horrible to their employees and facilitating brutal exploitation of the third world, they are very much a frightening piece of U.S. society today, and a threat to U.S. democracy, and something that could eventually become a threat to the U.S. government itself, because of the U.S. government's desire to simply, subcontract things out to private companies and let them do all the work for a lower price, and end up giving themselves a great liability in the process. But the point of this video more specifically is to show the recent massive growth in this for the US government, and how much Amazon is raking in from the US taxpayer as it continues to avoid paying taxes at every opportunity. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.